Well, as 2025 approaches, we're all considering predictions and what's to come. So I invited Howard Cohen and Jay McBain to discuss which trends might be the most important for next year and give some thoughts on how to navigate the potentially stormy waters on this last live show of 2024. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, and I'm Dave Sobel. I'll take questions and comments throughout the show, so make sure to put them in chat. If you have a question, we will happily respond to them, and make sure this is fully interactive. Now, I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. Now, a reminder, I am watching the chat and we will distinctly be watching for questions. Now, Jay McBain is a prominent figure in the global channel ecosystem, currently serving as chief analyst at Canalys, where he leads channels research in North America and contributes to worldwide channels research and advisory efforts. With a career spanning almost 30 years, he has held executive roles in channel sales, marketing, and strategy at companies like IBM, Lenovo, and Channelize. Jay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
Me too. I'm super excited to have this conversation. And Howard Cohen is a seasoned executive with over 35 years in the IT industry, specializing in channel partnerships and managed services. He's held senior positions across various facets of channel partner businesses, including sales, marketing, professional services, and operations. He's also a prolific writer and speaker, contributing to numerous IT industry publications and events. Howard, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Well, good to be here.
Well, with this esteemed panel and being the last show of the year, I want to talk a little bit about your perspective on what's going to matter in 2025. Now, I'll tease that my own predictions episode drops later today. And for those listening to the recording, it should already be out. So while I'm not repeating those here, we may be rhyming a little bit. Now, I'm going to start with AI. And I want to acknowledge that both that it's a thing and we need to be more specific than just AI. So I want to get a little sense of what do you think the practical AI trend that providers need to think about? Is it agentic AI? I don't think it's artificial general intelligence, but like specifically, what in this space do you think matters? Jay, what's top of mind?
Yeah, so first of all, AI is more than a thing. We think, and I think it's triggering a new era. We had 20 years of client server kind of triggering in the early 80s. We had now 20 years of cloud, starting kind of with SaaS in 1999 and then moving into infrastructure and consumption 11 years later. We're now into that next 20-year window. And a lot of things going on. First of all, we're predicting $158 billion of services opportunity around AI. But two things to note. One is the topology of AI, where you think about client server, you think about cloud, it actually marries both of it. The processing will be done on edge devices, about 80% of it on smartphones, on AI PCs. The actual business data, the promise of AI, which is your relationship with your banks, your airlines, your governments, that sits, 83% of it sits at the edge on premises today. And the work to train and tune these models and build these sovereign models over the next 10 years will mostly happen at the edge, which is a partner opportunity. And this is all going to drive 8% growth of a $5.4 trillion tech industry in 2025.
Now, Howard, I know you've got thoughts here.
Yeah, well, hopefully you've been reading my new column, Practical AI. You certainly positioned it perfectly at the outset, which I thank you for, Dave. I see AI as a redefinition. It's a redefinition of the way we look at applications. If you think back to when cloud first emerged, one of the big impacts on the MSP market was actually the creation of the MSP market. A lot of resellers who were busy moving product suddenly realized they're not going to be able to move much product anymore, and they became service providers, which was wise. Many of them didn't know what they were going to do next, and they thought, maybe I'll become an application developer. Some did. Some did successfully. Now, we're going to have a redefinition of the way in which we interact with applications. Whereas you used to have a menu-driven environment where you clicked on what you wanted to do or what have you. Now you're going to basically have, instead of an application, you're going to have an assistant. You'll be able to tell that assistant, this is what I need to get done. This is how I need to get it done. You can be as explicit as you want to be. And the good news is that you can actually have a dialogue to better tune to, or more finely define what it is you're looking for. So that's going to be more of a conversation than a choice off of a menu. But there are a lot of gotchas. You mentioned agentic. Agentic is a really good answer if you're Microsoft. It's a good way to put the power of AI into the hand of the typical user. The typical user will be able to say, I need something that will do this for me. And the this does not have to be a kind of a go, no-go this. You used to set up thresholds. If it exceeds 10,000, do this. If the temperature gets to being above 75, turn on the air conditioner. Now, you can actually say, if it gets too warm, and your AI will figure out what you've meant by too warm in the past and turn on the air conditioner then. It'll also think about how cold you might want it to be based on previous experiences with you. So it's more of intent than specific empirical answers. It's a very different approach. On the other end, we've been talking about large language models for a long time. And there are some who say, well, the first step in building an application that uses AI is to train a large language model with a massive amount of data. Many of the developers I'm talking to are saying that's very expensive. It's expensive not only in terms of money, it's expensive in terms of time. So instead of creating your own, take a look. There's a burgeoning marketplace now of pre-trained, pre-developed LLMs that you can purchase. You can then use a technology called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, to add whatever data you want to add to it, so that it knows what's going on in your company, for example. The one thing nobody seems to want, and I think it's becoming more and more obvious why, nobody wants to gather their information from the internet. First of all, because so much of it is just nonsense, but also because it becomes very easy to violate other people's copyrights. So I think that it's a complete redefinition of the way we look at the way in which we use digital devices.
Well, I'll tell you that the big thing that I'm looking for next year to sort of close out AI is, the first is, I noted that a Forrester analyst indicated that he thought that the market was going to split 50-50 roughly into consumer spend at 150% and then the other be through the APIs. And it's important for me that to watch that play out, because the second thing that I'm watching for is, will anybody actually start making money? Because we're burning through cash in terms of deploying these models. And I think it'd be interesting to see which of these companies start figuring out ways to really make money. And I think that's one of the things that solution providers need to keep an eye on. But I want to move us along because I got a couple of different areas I want to hit. And Howard, I know you noted that you saw something that you thought was really important looking at 25 was the aftermath of CompTIA selling their brand and their training assets. Now, this is in the context of an ecosystem of trade groups emerging, such as the National Society of IT Service Providers, who've crossed the 1,000 MSP line in terms of membership already. Plus, if I layer in there the de-emphasis of vendors and vendor relationships as providers use them more as tools, and rather than focusing on product resale. What's your thought on what's going to play out next year, Howard?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for reading me, Dave, because obviously we've got a couple of topics in there that I've spoken about before.
I do try and be prepared when I show up for this.
But I think that the CompTIA, you use the word trade organizations, trade associations, and I bristle when I hear folks from CompTIA saying that, and several of them have said that to me. I don't see what we need as an industry. Well, let me correct myself there. I don't see us as an industry anymore. I am much more focused on us as service providers as a profession. When you talk about the National Society of IT Service Providers, it's a big part of their mission to establish and improve the perception of service providers as professionals. In that context, CompTIA, it's good that they're not going to use the name anymore. They're not going to be an industry association. I question, though, whether they see it that way. I think they may, again, try to be agnostic and not keep balance between all the vendors that are involved. Just because partners, MSPs, ITSPs of all kinds, are now engaging in a toolsmith relationship with the vendors where they're using their products instead of reselling their products, doesn't mean that the vendors are no longer important. As a matter of fact, I think they're more important than ever. But we're going to need a redefinition of the way in which we interact with each other, the way we see each other. There needs to be new criteria for vendors to choose preferable partners and partners to choose preferable vendors. This is not simple. It would be great if something as large and now as well endowed, because the endowment from Thoma Bravo creates a permanent fund for the existence of this organization. Being that well funded and that well resourced, it would be wonderful if they were focused on the transition to a profession. But I think that's going to take more time, and that's my biggest concern.
Interesting. Jay, I know you also posted on LinkedIn. You had a number of thoughts on what might play out here as well. Where do you think this is going to fall out in 25?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of obsessed over this, and it's kind of been a personal hobby over the course of 30 years. Over my shoulder, you'll see kind of a mashup of influence. And CompTIA is one of 67 associations that serve the broader channel. And the broader channel has 20 different partner types in it. The fact of the matter is, last March, all of us had to learn about consumer AI really quickly. It was at the point that our neighbors, our friends, our family started to see this tool start to create poetry and music and start to, develop deep fakes. And we got asked as tech people, hey, did we just light up Skynet here? When's Arnold Schwarzenegger coming back? So the entire industry, there's 337,000 companies that have at least one managed contract, and they have an average of 8 people each. So you do the multiplication over that and VARs and other things. There's about 10 million people that have to learn and form an opinion on AI within about 30 days. And so if you ask everybody in our industry what they read, what they listen to, where they go, and who they follow, it comes down to a very small set of places. And CompTIA, while they have 66 other maybe competitive associations, there's 14 total points of influence. And how you get information, how you form opinions, how you create these orchestrations between vendors, partners, distributors, and others, everything that Howard just said, there's lots of competition outside of associations kind of for that type of thing. So that's what I get obsessed over. There's 12% of people, for example, who love podcasts like this. It's the number one way they learn and form these opinions and think about their business for next year, like we're doing today. There's 35% of people who go to the 270 events in our industry because they like that physical atmosphere and rubbing shoulders and learning from their peers. But understand that CompTIA sits within a kind of a lake of 1,000 different places, which is very few when you think of the tens of millions of people. But associations themselves are not the tip of the spear anymore of where information is traded and where these connections are made.
So first off, I'll say, but thank you for endorsing my business model because there's a reason that I'm spending a lot of time on digital investment of training and doing these kinds of events. So thank you for that. I'll sort of wrap this one by offering that I think this. Howard sort of laid it out that it's an interesting opportunity. If I call this sort of new thing TIA, because it has to have a new name and it's something. If I look at what this opportunity is you've combined the fact that we are in a very transformational moment for this industry as it moves not only just from the regular into services play, but AI driven and the need to drive that. I think this organization has a real opportunity to redefine itself. And I think the one question is they're obviously going through a CEO search. What they're really looking for is a broad visionary that's going to step in with a vision like, I am stepping in to make this one of Jay's 14 most important relay points, where it is we are going to be at the intersection to provide great information, enable community of communities to make sure that people get access to thought leaders and information, and we amplify all of the components of the ecosystem and be kind of a hybrid of a media organization as well as like a research org and kind of and an enablement org. If you pull that together and say, we're going to be broad about driving forward thinking and amplifying voices, I think you've got a real opportunity to do something really interesting. We'll see as this plays out in 25. Now, Jay, I gotta keep us brisk because you recently updated that the PSA RMM market has a new market share leader. Now, this is disruptive because for the past 29 years, it's been ConnectWise. And as we go into 2025, the new market leader is Kaseya. Now, I'm going to offer, because we're on the business of tech, I got to ask you, why should we care, particularly in the context of next year?
Yeah, so as you know, and you know well, we date back in this industry a long time, and I had worked at Autodesk, in the early days before Datto, before Kaseya, as this thing built out. But from 1995, from when ConnectWise started selling software outside of Tampa Bay, things they put together for their own MSP, and when Autodesk, kind of joined the fray in 1999, and TigerPaw came out of Nebraska and selling their tools. Till today, ConnectWise has been the industry leader. They've been the number one largest selling platform, and it was always on the larger side. It was the MSP 500 or the MSP 501. It was always, 2/3 of them or more ran ConnectWise, and the 8-person shops, which make up most of the industry, kind of had a choice of other things. Well, those two companies now, Kaseya and ConnectWise, command over half the market just by two companies. And they're building out a platform model, but they're doing it very, very different. One by unit economics, one by kind of more traditional SaaS platform model. And we're going to see probably in public markets in the first, in the next 18 months, which one of those or both of those, become winners. Because in a platform economy, there's room for 3 or 4 winners. And now you see other players like Ninja and you see Halo growing between 50 and 100% year over year. In a difficult environment. This is a really interesting place to watch, and how tooling around the other 25 companies is going to take place, and the segments and the sectors and the geography of how all this takes place. I think MSPs should care, what's in their stack and how it's all coming together, and how private equity and other things are making an impact here.
Yeah, and I would be remiss. So say one of the things that I noticed there was the drop from Enable from 3rd place further down. And by the way, I feel like I need to do my typical disclosures here. I'm still a shareholder in Enable, so I felt it was also notable that we see that shuffling both of Ninja and Halo coming in there. Howard, I'll turn it around to you and say, like, is this on your list of things that matter, and if so, and how and why?
Well, first of all, I mean, from a market analysis standpoint, I'm one of those people who believes the competition is the thing that breeds innovation. And so the smaller guys are the ones that really interest me, because they're the ones who are working hardest to figure out what users need most and provide it. But in that vein, I'll compare this to something else that I've been focusing on, which is the whole citizen developer movement. About a year ago, I started writing heavily about low-code, no-code platforms. Recently, the last, I'd say, 4 articles in my column have focused on the transition from low-code, no-code platforms to AI-based citizen development. I suspect that in the coming year, we're going to see someone emerge with a fully AI-enabled PSA RMM solution that's going to complete. I vividly remember Arnie Bellini coming to sell me ConnectWise in 1996, a million years ago. And personally, I believe that ConnectWise's success was due in large part to the incredible salesmanship that gentleman is capable of. He brought a lot to it. Do I think that that's what's causing them to start to lose market share? I don't know. But I do know that there's going to be a redefinition. I think that we're going to see an intent-based, more interactive tool that will help you think about how you're running your service practice, where your efforts to be profitable are paying off and where they're not. That's kind of what I see in the PSA RMM market coming in 2025.
That'll be interesting to watch because obviously Synchro is making a play in that name. SuperOps making a play in that name. Halo, of course, investing in that. I will be very curious to say a space that I had thought long had gotten lack of interesting is maybe heating up and getting interesting again. Now, reminder, we're watching that chat, and if you've got questions or comments, make sure to throw them in. We'll throw them up on screen, and we'll address any questions you might have. Now, gents, we always talk about cybersecurity, so I want to offer a thought and a premise and get your take to define kind of cybersecurity. And I'm going to throw this take out there. No, it's a bit of a bold statement intentionally. So I think cybersecurity is huge because it's the new infrastructure offering of 2025. You have to have it. Nobody likes spending money on it, and it's all becoming a platform and a commodity. Talk to me about cybersecurity in 2025. Jay, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let's run the numbers. So cybersecurity will hit, from a product point of view, hardware and software, $97 billion. There's going to be $2 in services that partners get to spin out of that. So the industry itself becomes a $282 billion industry when you kind of put those two things together. Here's the growth rates. While the industry is growing at 8, which is fantastic, tech is the fastest growing industry of all 27. Now you've got cyber growing in double digits, but that's not the only thing. The cyber services are growing faster than the products. Partners, MSPs, 99% of them have, some level of cyber practice, and that's growing at 13%. The managed security is growing at 15%. So again, double what the industry is overall, but that's also about quadruple what the global economy is growing. So cyber is absolutely the place to be. 2024 was the platform year where 6,500 cyber vendors, all with their mousetraps that they invented, trying to pitch MSPs that they've got, the right thing to, stop the bad guys. We know that today, towards a zero trust or a SASE model in enterprise, there's at least 7 products that need to be bought. And what happens is it starts to coalesce into a platform model, which isn't a commodity model. It's to say that companies like Palo Alto, companies like Cisco, Splunk, Microsoft Security, CrowdStrike, and others start to take on a very foundational role. And the other players, 6,000 plus other players, have to integrate with those foundational players, not unlike the way that Salesforce and ServiceNow and Workday and HubSpot work in SaaS, and not unlike the ways that AWS, Microsoft, and Google work in hyperscalers. This integration first buyer that we now have going into 2025, our majority buyer, by the way, is born after 1982, both by quantity and by JIT. We just went over that demographic changeover, but they're integration first buyers. They'll buy a product 80% as good as the next product if it works better in their environment. This platform economy is good for partners, which the other ones that I mentioned have been great for partners. And this maturity of the cybersecurity stack is the opposite of commoditization.
Well, that seems encouraging. How are you thinking about cybersecurity for next year?
First of all, in the conversation we had about AI is certainly a factor that's going to impact what's going on with cybersecurity next year. First of all, people who are using AI more and more profoundly in their networks are going to be much more concerned about who can get at all that data. Flip it around, though, AI is perhaps the best hacker that has ever existed. So everybody's going to have to up their game to figure out how they stay ahead of something that can process logs as fast as it can and figure out ways around every measure we've put in place. I agree with Jay. You think about companies, there's so many of them. The first one that jumps to my mind is Tanium, only because they were the first ones to talk about tool sprawl. Nobody wants to have a million different tools from a million different manufacturers with a million different support requirements. Best of platform has absolutely replaced that. The question is which platform is going to emerge and continue to be best. I also think that we're going to be impacted very much by this whole shift over to a don't sell my product, use my product method. One particular hardware manufacturer that I'm thinking of surprised me. They are more and more shifting their partners to reselling their services from their SOC, from their own data centers. They're the provider of this cybersecurity services, and the partners are now becoming much more focused on being sales agents for those services. Is that a good thing? I don't know. I know that the expertise that some of the best in the business offer is a phenomenal value, but the heavy lifting is going to happen in the data centers and the SOCs, and it makes sense to me that the larger you are and the deeper your pockets, the better a service you can provide. So I think it may shift that way. I'm not sure, and I'm taking a wait and see attitude.
Well, that's fair. Which leads me then to kind of a larger picture. If we're thinking about what worries us a little bit, I'm going to offer 2025 could be a really turbulent year. Tariffs might drive up the cost of IT related hardware. Trade wars could impact a bunch of different sectors, and big tech broadly is increasingly under fire. We've got Google, Microsoft, Amazon all under antitrust scrutiny right now. Or a counter argument could be that a business-friendly administration starts setting everybody free on M&A. In light of all of this turbulence, what do you think are the factors at a large macroeconomic scale that people should focus on? And Howard, I'm going to kick it over to you to start and to say, what are you watching?
I am, as always, watching the behavior of people. Jay mentioned 386,000 companies with at least one managed contract. 386,000 means 386,000 owners or more, since some are co-owned. And people are the biggest wild card in the entire algorithm. Which way will they turn? What will they do? We may see a lot more M&A. We've seen a lot this past year. We may find a lot of people going to the mattresses to survive in an unfriendly government environment. It's hard to say. But I do know that the biggest problem we have faced as a profession is that there are tons of players who are still stuck in the 1990s and focused on selling products to customers that those customers can now get far more cost effectively. So my concern is that if we don't see that start to whittle down, I'd like to see that. I hate to say it this way, but I'd love to see that 386,000 continue to reduce down to just those who are really in it to provide truly quality services.
That makes some sense. Now, Jay, I'm going to ask, what are at a broad macroeconomic level, what are those things that you're keeping an eye on for next year?
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about the year to come from every metric we're seeing. There was turbulence, a lot of turbulence in 2024.